All right. So again, warm welcome to Inner Fitness. And our topic today is subtle awareness. So that should be interesting. We'll have to figure out what that actually means. So let's start as usual with a reflection. Seated comfortably. And actually, that might be a good place to start for today's theme. Is this idea of being seated comfortably, being aware of how the body is seated. Am I aware on a very subtle level that the body is seated comfortably? So take a moment to check in, as subtle a checking as you can, as to how the body is seated. And if you need to make adjustments, go ahead. And while I'm checking in on the body, let's use that moment to refine the subtlety of our focus. Bring your focus to the breath of the body. So for just a moment, zoom in on the lungs breathing in the body, as if you're watching from a distance, just observing the lungs breathing. And becoming more subtle still, see if you can zoom in on the heartbeat of the body. Observe the heart beating in the body. And observe yourself observing, noticing how quiet and focused I need to become to check in on something as subtle as the heartbeat of the body. It takes all my attention. My mind can't wander or pull me away. I have to be completely focused to experience something as subtle as the heartbeat of the body. Now that I am so focused, pulling my attention upwards, behind the forehead, focusing on that point behind the forehead. It's not a physical point, but that place from where it feels thoughts originate. This is where I, the thinker, am sitting. I have been observing the body, and now I'm observing the self, putting all my attention on the self, I, the thinker. The feeling of being separate from the body inside, like the body is a heavy coat I wear, and I am the subtle being, the thinker inside. My sense of self concentrated into a single point, a tiny point of thinking, living energy, conscient energy. I, the thinker. And as I focus on the self, I notice that there is a wave of calm, quiet, that naturally comes when I focus on the self as a point of living energy, a soul. It's a calm that doesn't come when I think of myself as the body, but it happens naturally when I go into the experience of being not physical, but a point of spiritual living energy here, behind the forehead, listening through the ears, looking out through the windows of the eyes, the feeling of the body, that heavy coat dangling down below, but everything being driven from me here behind the forehead. I am the life force in this body. Without me, this heavy coat, the body would fall down, cease to function. The body is easy to detect, but I am very, very subtle, hidden inside. The physical eyes can't see me. Science can't detect me. But when I am quiet, introverted, very subtle in my focus, I feel fully myself. I, the living being, the soul. Om Shanti. So our topic is subtle awareness. And it really is the cornerstone of spirituality, of transformation, of growth. Because this subtle awareness is going to help a lot in not just being able to experience the subtle, the invisible, which is the world of spirituality, but also see around blind spots that tend to come in how we look at the self. It's very easy to look at others. We like to spend a lot of time looking at others, being impressed by them or critical of them. But we get a little blind when it comes to looking at ourselves. So the more subtle, quiet I can become, the more clarity I can acquire around observing the self. But as usual, let's start with the easy part, physical or outer fitness, and then see how it maps onto inner fitness. So outer fitness, when it comes to physical movement of the body, whether it's in a fitness class or any kind of movement, what is the role, if any, of subtle awareness in physical movement of the body? What is the role, if any, of subtle awareness? Any thoughts on that? And again, you can type in the chat box. I'm keeping my eye there So if I look over here, it's not because I'm ignoring you. Or you can unmute yourselves and share through audio. What is the role of subtle awareness in physical movement of the body?
I could say something.
Yeah.
So if you are subtly aware of your body, then you have awareness. And when you have awareness, then if your body starts to go off even just a little, you would be able to catch on to it much faster than somebody who's not aware and would let it go on for much longer before they become aware. So that could be an advantage on a physical level from what I had at the top of my head.
Really good points. You can catch things early, and that could save you a lot of grief later on. Such a good point. Thank you, Leah. Hema, I know you were giving blessings, so go ahead and share.
So subtle awareness plays such a great role because that's what I experienced. As you know, like I've been like I had arthritis, like rheumatoid arthritis since last 25 years, and the knee got replaced recently and all. So I was always in a pain, and I wasn't able to climb the stairs or get off the stairs like in a normal way, right? I used to have my 2 feet on one steps, and that I always like it's since last 25 years, right? And it becomes very mechanical. So soon after surgery, I could understand, like, I mean, I still cannot step down. Stepping down was main concern than stepping up, because when you step down, there's a lot of load on your knees, right? So that's when you need a balance, and that's when the pain actually, like I was experiencing when the knees were not normal. So then there was like, after a couple of months, I used to go to physio and all, and I always used to tell them that I really want to like I want to step off the like step down the stair, I want to step I want to use the staircase in a normal way. I really don't want to put my 2 feet on one steps after having surgery, right? So they said, no, it will come. Then I changed the physiotherapist, and then she said that, no, let's practice. She said that um, have awareness that you have a surgery, and now you are able to walk normal way, in a normal way, and that is something you have to constantly pay attention. And I was very much aware that this is something to do with my awareness, but there could be some part, physical part on my body, in terms of muscles and all, they probably need to get trained and all. But I was very much aware that it has something to do with my awareness. But she said, no, once you start practicing. And then one day in her clinic, she said, okay, let's practice it over here. And then I just stepped down in a normal way. She said that, okay, just hold on to the rail, but don't put your 2 feet on one steps, one steps. And I started doing it, and it has changed since then. I mean, even like after that, like for a couple of weeks, I had to make it a point, and I have to be very aware, even in a house as well, that if I go down and go up, like I have to be aware that, oh, I am not supposed to put 2 feet on one steps. So it has a lot to do with the subtle awareness. It really changes the way we operate, actually.
So thank you, Hema. There's a few pieces that came up in your sharing. One is the relationship between awareness and injury, which Leah also opened the door to. And that's often where souls start to really develop body awareness is post-injury. Another one is the relationship between awareness and attitude, so that we can break through restricting attitudes with the power of awareness. And the third one is awareness and attention. So really having to not go into sort of a default or inattentive state. But if I'm going to, have growth or a change, in this case of movement patterns or restoring movement patterns, I'm going to have to pay attention, really remember. And often, I know smriti in Hindi, this word smriti, it's very interesting. And thank you, Pauline. I see your note, we'll come to that. But this word smriti is really interesting. I'll type it in the chat for all of you. It has a couple of translations. It's a difficult word to translate. If you put this into Google, it will just use the word memory, which is very interesting. But it does mean to remember, and it also means awareness. So hearing that a lot in Hemis sharing, that I have to be aware meant I had to remember. I couldn't sort of check out. I had to remember, especially when we're trying to heal, restore, or learn new movement patterns in physical movement. And we'll see that's in spiritual as well. We have some sharing here in the chat box. When you're working with a coach, you are able to follow directions and paying attention in terms of alignment, which will prevent injury, and you're also focused towards achieving your goals. So yeah, that's pretty much a summary of the whole situation. Thank you, Pauline, of what you're hoping for. Any coach would find it a dream if this is what the client is doing, is being very aware. And especially this idea of alignment. Now, this is awareness. Why do we say subtle? So in terms of physical, and we played a bit with this in the meditation, we're going to just take something simple because we've been focusing on it the last little day or two, core stability. Now, many coaches will tell you that core stability is the cornerstone of all movement. So whatever you are doing, core stability will have to be understood, is what a coach will tell you in terms of movement, that it is the centerpiece. So that's why we're going to take that one, because we'll cover a lot of bases. Core is a beautiful word. You find it everywhere, from architecture to physical movement to spirituality. You've often heard core values, right? So it shows up, apple core, it's in food. It shows up everywhere. And I think when we hear the word, we kind of know what it means. We know that it's like the main thing, it's pretty central, it's the driver, things are happening from the core. So it's pretty important. So core stability is no different. Core stability in terms of the body, or we also see it in terms of structure, structural integrity. But core stability, the body has the center of gravity. And it's somewhere around the lumbar, pelvic, sort of lower torso kind of area. There's a lot of important stuff going on. So this tends to be where core stability focuses, but in truth, it actually is probably the whole torso, so shoulder girdle, spine, pelvis, and for some, it's the whole body because they have such an integrated approach to the entire skeleton, and dance is a great example of that. So, but just kind of, even if we just focus on the traditional idea of core, is that sort of lower torso, lumbar, sort of kind of, I mean, I say the whole thing because the diaphragm's involved, thoracic's involved, but just even if we look at that, just the lumbar area, sacral area. There are these muscle groups down there. So we've got the spine, this architecture of the body, and we know that that's the core because, again, not to depress anyone or frighten anyone, but when you have a physical body decomposing, we know the bones are pretty much the last thing to go. Right? So they're pretty hard tissue. So they're like the core, right? Just like a house. Things can be falling off drywall, but the frame just kind of stays there. The skeleton, the bones, we say the house has good bones. So the bones of the house, the housing in which I, the soul, sits is this body. And the skeleton has this beautiful architecture, especially the spine. The whole thing is a wonder, the architecture of the physical body. And when it's properly aligned and held in place, stabilized, movement is a pain-free experience. So Hema was talking about what she was dealing with, and very often, connected to what Leah was talking about, very often we will see people who have mechanical oddities going on, and it will go on for quite a while, actually. I mean, they don't notice it for so long, and suddenly they're saying, I need a hip replacement. And I remember one soul coming to me, and I've been watching for years, and they just really had a strange gait. I actually didn't know how they really functioned. And they did high, and they like to ski, and they just had a really strange hip kind of thing going on when they moved, when they walked. And then they said that they're getting a hip, and they're quite young, they're getting a hip replacement. I thought, well, that's great. And they got it. And then after, the same mechanical thing was there. And I was sort of like, they might be getting another hip replacement soon. So, but, because it will lead to pain when the body isn't working the way it was optimally meant to work, when that alignment of the architecture being supported by the muscles, etc., it's not happening, the body sends signals of pain, and it sends it for a while. As you're sitting there right now, if we really listened in, if I'm not aligned, if the body is not aligned, the body is sending you pain. But sometimes we get so used to it, so numb, that we don't even hear it until it gets, and we say, oh my goodness, I've got such lower back pain. And the body's saying, well, hey, I've been telling you for a while that something's wrong here. And we are in a time when souls are sitting a lot. So the body has this beautiful, the spine, this gentle S, you've probably seen it. Very gentle S, the thoracic spine curving out. The lumbar has a gentle curve in. Architecturally powerful, straight. I mean, when you look at the back, you don't want scoliosis, but when you look in profile, straight is not a good idea. You want these gentle, it's just such a brilliant architecture to the spine. But as we're sitting a lot, if we're not paying attention, if we're not turning on that lumbar spine, that SI joint, we're losing the curve in our lower back. So I want you to just take a subtle moment now to check. As I'm sitting here, is there any curve in my lower back? Or is it completely straight or even curving the other way? Right? So sometimes we talk about slouching. You notice that I just shrank. What just happened to my spine? It's like a little hobbit. So this, if I do this a long time, and I don't have very good clothes on, so I don't want to show you. So in terms of my pants are falling down, but if you could see, it's like curving, rather than this gentle curve, it's curving this way. This puts a lot of pressure on the spine, so it will send signals of pain. And as Leah was sharing, if I'm paying attention, I'll pick them up and I can help out the spine. I can do that SI joint turned on correct, maybe move around. But we don't. For long periods of time, we're seated in this architecturally compromised way, and we're completely unaware. So the body has this amazing architecture, and it has a muscle system to protect that architecture, to stabilize it for healthy movement. And it actually affects breathing, which means the diaphragm, the rib, alignment, which of course affects organs, and on it goes. There's a ripple effect. So it's really an amazing system in the body, but those muscles that are supporting the spine are subtle, or we call them deep. There is a superficial one, which is very helpful in spinal flexion and really some support, and that's the rectus abdominis, also known as the six-pack or the washboard. Right? It's very visible, and it's in the front. That's a double whammy. We tend to only be aware of what's going on in the front of our body and very much ignoring the back, which is unfortunate. And perhaps we should go back to the symmetry session. But we tend to just focus on the front, and we tend to focus on the image. So the moment you say, we're going to do some core exercises to souls, they get into position. They lie on the floor and get ready to crunch, 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 crunch. This actually is spinal flexion, by the way. We go crunch, crunch. Now, remember what happened to me when I lost that lumbar, that beautiful curve? I kind of, this is what happens to houses when they're losing their integrity. They kind of get shorter. Now, in truth, when the alignment is right, long is strong, length is strength. So that when the core stabilizers are working, those deep muscles, I actually get taller. I stand tall. This will be significant spiritually. But when it turns off, I shrink. Stand tall, shrink. Give it a try, everybody. Everybody shrink. Yes. Now from the base of your spine, even if you don't know what SI is or anything, just to use your awareness from the base of your spine, I want that feeling of restoring those gentle curves in the spine. Not forcing it into a straight, but those gentle curves. You're going to feel your lumbar spine as if someone gently put their hand on your lower back and they just gave it a little support. And it's going to create that length. If I become aware, if I pay attention, the body's like, oh, I can breathe. You've opened things up. This is wonderful. I am free. So this requires these deep stabilizers to work. We have one in the front called the TVA, the transverse abdominis, some side, external, internal obliques, and some back ones, which is the multifidus and the spinal erectors. So it's these deep muscles that are working in 3D, this core set, these deep muscles to support the spine at its optimum. But they are deep. And when we talk about core, people suddenly go into the superficial. And I'm not insulting by using those terms. Those are the anatomical terms. Superficial, the rectus abdominis. So it looks like I've got core strength going on. I've got this great six pack. And people say, wow, you have amazing abs. And actually the amazing abs are deep. They can't even be seen, but they can be experienced indirectly through how I'm moving around, how I'm moving the body. I can't directly look at them, but I can tell. We can tell by the posture, etc. So think of the dancer. So this happens a lot in, so that's when we age, our height shortens. Yes, unless you're a dancer. You will notice, I've noticed this in dancers because very often when their dancing career is over, they go into teaching dance. So you'll see these ballet masters that are quite advanced in age and they still are standing tall, this incredible dignity, because they're so used to its constant paying attention until it becomes natural. They're constantly paying attention to the alignment, that subtle awareness. Now, I could bring up Misty's video again, but we'll see if we can bypass that, because I'm sure all of you are by now really bored with it. We've showed it so many times, but it just gives a sense of how subtle that attention needs to be. And I'm going to need some knowledge, some understanding as well, because I need to know what I'm paying attention to and what I'm trying to do. And it's really, really challenging for some. But what I've noticed is when souls are on board for that, when they're actually interested, when they kind of put, as we say, ego aside, I don't actually care about having a six-pack. I care about having core stability. And yes, in some ways, the rectus abdominis is part of that, but a very superficial part. I want to have, and it usually is after an injury, I want to have a strong core. To have a pain-free life, I need to understand the deeper things going on. So they'll be on board, they'll be interested because they understand the attainment. This is super important. You can lecture people till the cows come home about the importance of core stability, and they'll say, I don't have time, I don't feel like anything's going on, I don't get a sweat, because they don't realize the value, the significance, the importance of it. And the ego is still saying, I just want it to look good on the outside. So they ignore the deep, they ignore the back, just say, I just want to look good on the outside. Until such time, and again, an injury can do it, until such time as it becomes personally personally so important. I want to really have healthy, pain-free movement. I need to focus in on those deep muscles, the core, the alignment. Once they're on board, then they start to go into these different classes, training, where they're educated and get to practice. Those are the two big things. Educated and get to practice proper deep alignment. It's going to require developing subtle awareness, subtle body awareness in this case. And I love it when that's happening, because when they're in a class and they're working on, these are typically called mind-body classes. When they're in the class and they're working on it, and someone watching on the outside is like, are they doing anything in there? They're barely moving, but they're doing a lot. It's just all rather invisible, but they're doing a lot. And they get this atmosphere comes into the room of such focus, as if you've walked into a room of meditators. They're open-eyed meditators, because their eyes will be open, but they've got this look, this feeling of introversion, of really paying attention to what's going on inside. They're doing something, but it's very subtle. So it can be invisible to the naked or untrained eye. Now, a good trainer will see exactly what they're doing and be able to give correction. And that reminds me a bit of a friend I have who is an architect. And, again, back to the good bones of a house, right? You can have a house that looks really run down and it's been on the market forever and it's being, such a low price, they're almost giving it away. He will look at that house and say, that house has good bones, right? He has the eye to see that, whereas everyone else is saying there's no value to that house whatsoever, and saying it has good bones. He's an architect and a builder, so he'll buy the house and he will completely renovate it, knowing it has good bones. And I've seen this multiple times, and once he's done with it, he can sell it at whatever price he wants, because he's brought out the dignity of the house, the good bones, the value of the house is so obvious once, but he has to have the eye for it. So we also have to, when we're working on physical alignment, we have to develop a good eye for the subtle. Ego will pull us away from it. Ego will try to pull us back to what we call quantity over quality. And we've talked about that a lot in past sessions. So someone goes to do some push-ups, which is actually based on a strong plank, and they're just, how many push-ups can I get done in the amount of time given? That's all they're focusing on. And in some circumstances, that is an understandable objective. But if I'm interested in the quality, it might take them a while before they even begin the push-ups, because they're spending their time, as we say, to set the foundation. Set the foundation before you add movement. So as an example, we're going to get you to all stand up in a safe space where you can move around. This is a very simple exercise. Do not panic. We won't get you to balance on one leg yet. So standing with your feet about hip-width apart, it doesn't have to be perfect. Don't worry about that. And all I want you to do is and this doesn't have to be big. Don't make yourself seasick doing this, but gently, just very gently rocking your weight forward and back. So just gently sort of rocking your weight forward and back, toes, heels, ball of the toe, foot, heels, ball of the foot, heels. Very gentle, doesn't have to be big. As I said, you don't want to get seasick or anything. And as you're doing that, I want you to subtly observe what's going on with your weight and what feels more comfortable to you. So you might hang out on the balls of the foot for a moment, see how that feels, and then go back on the heels, see how that feels. Just be aware, become quiet, tune in. Where do I usually live? On my heels, the balls of the foot? What kind of feels familiar? And what we're going to try and do is have you settle with about 60%, doesn't have to be exact, but obviously more than half of your body weight on the balls of your feet. So that's where this metatarsal crease is on the balls of your feet while your heels are still touching the ground. And then spread your toes so you have a good base of support between the big toe and the littlest toe, the pinky toe. So you've got that base of support. Now building up from your foundation, have you locked your knees out? That is really over straightened. So maybe soften, let the kneecaps float a bit, soften a bit through the legs, and then moving up through the legs all the way up, arriving at the pelvis. What is going on there? Are you prone to lordosis? Do you have sway back? Or do you tend to sit as you stand? And what that looks like is this. Right? So I'm really, some people are this, and some are this. Go ahead, rock it forward and back. Figure out what's going on. Just feel it out. You just want to be aware and then see if you can figure out for yourself what is a healthy position for the pelvis. What's healthy? Again, remembering architecturally, want that soft curve in the lower back, not over curved, sway back or lordosis, soft curve, and still activating through the front of the body. So this building this corset and then moving up towards the ribs. Now, some of us love the pigeon thing. And some of us love to conquer crushing of organs. So again, just feeling it out, what feels, this is you, kind of not getting a whole lot of cueing here, but just seeing if you can feel what is going on, what allows your diaphragm to work, what allows breathing to happen without putting strain on the thoracic because of overextending through the front. And then the shoulder girdle. Whenever you tell people good posture, they do this weird thing, right? We want to feel very open through the front and back of the shoulders. So checking in, maybe letting the arms hang and checking in on what's going on through the shoulder girdle. Are you elevating, depressing? What's going on there? Go ahead, move it around. See what it feels like. Probably just want to move, right? And then the skull. It's a heavy thing, this head. And after all that computer time, this is the attractive thing that's happening. Now, chiropractors will tell you ideally to line up your ear with the midline of your collarbone. And then people do this. Oh, yeah, this looks really, this is not sustainable. It's more of a feeling of lifting and stacking the skull on top of the spinal column. So that the feeling at the end of all this is almost as if there's a string at the top of your head and you are hanging from the string. Rather than pushing against gravity, it's very light. The entire skeleton is stacked. That's what we're going for. Now, are you happy with what you've got? I have to look at Nora because she's in the room with me. Are you happy?
Maybe.
Okay, she's sort of happy. I'm going to ask you to see if you can maintain that alignment and start to walk. What are your arms doing? What's the gait? What happens through the knees, through the entire body, the hips? It's all about learning awareness. And come have a seat again. Now, the odds are pretty high that as you walk around, you pay absolutely no attention to what's going on. You just walk. And so this awareness and observing yourself as you paid attention, this was just the body. What happened internally? What kind of introversion was necessary to cue in on the subtle? So when it comes to spirituality, that is magnified a whole lot more. What I'm trying to do, the starting point, the core of spirituality is self-identity. It's all built on that. Who am I? Everything's built on the letter I. And so this idea, spirituality means I understand myself to be a spirit, a soul. this invisible, non-physical, eternal being. That's me. It's not that I have a soul, that there's some sort of light force floating around me somewhere, but I am a soul. I am the energy inside of this body, and I'm not diffused everywhere. I'm not even physical, but I do exist. I have coordinates. I am here. It requires incredible introversion to practically touch that experience, not just have it as a thought, but to feel it. To feel that the body belongs more to the chair in which it's sitting and less to me. To feel that requires just everything else has to be sort of tuned out, and I have that single focus, core. Who am I? And it's so intense, just like in the physical fitness class, when we have to go into an artificial setting to get our core to fire and hope that that will carry in to our day-to-day life, we have to actually sit down. We call it meditation. We actually have to sit down, some like soft music, some like lighting, some like that. We have to kind of go into this artificial situation just to experience ourselves. And very often, you know, these ideas of meditation, we start doing other things. And there's nothing wrong with doing other things, but it's not spirituality. Because the foundation of spirituality is to experience myself to be a spirit, a soul. So I have to keep coming back to that foundation. Have I mastered that? And it will take incredible introversion, single-minded focus. Just like in the fitness class, they get that meditative state going on to feel the subtlety of the body. I'm going to have to become very introverted. My eyes don't need to close, but I need to be very focused, internally focused, to be aware of the subtlety of the self. So as we're sitting here now, I want you to do the easy part first, to be aware of the body. You can be aware of its outline. There's the hand, the weight of the body into the seat or chair in which it's sitting, the activity of the body, the breathing, everything else. Just be very aware. This comes naturally to us, to be aware of the body. We can physically even see it. Now become aware of who is observing the body. I am observing the body. Almost as if I'm observing something else. I am observing the body. Now I want to observe myself, the one who is observing. So turning inwards behind the forehead and feeling as if the body is wrapped around me, a vehicle in which I'm sitting, and I'm inside here thinking, present, a point. I'm not diffused everywhere. I am in an exact coordinate. I'm sitting here behind the forehead, a discrete entity. But I'm not physical, but I'm very real. I can feel my own activity, thinking, reflecting, observing. Just notice what happens. Maybe it feels numb. Maybe the mind wanders. Maybe I'm not sure if I'm doing it right. But what is very important, just as it was with the physical body, and yes, it often happens when there's pain or crisis, is I have to be interested to feel this. I have to feel it's very important to my health and well-being spiritually to have this subtle awareness. As alignment is to the body, awareness is to the self, the soul. So to be aware of myself, I am eternal, imperishable, and the body is not. So to really get that relationship between me and the body in the correct alignment. When we do, just as with the physical body, when I start to have that core stability developed and strengthened through understanding and practice, the body starts to get taller. We stand tall. The same thing will happen spiritually. We have the topics, we call them knowledge again and yoga. So understanding and practice. When I start to work with these, I, the soul, start to stand tall. And we call that dignity or self-respect. It's not a physical thing, although it may show up physically, but it's not a physical thing. It's the sense internally of standing tall, of having that dignity, that self-respect, that empowerment. When I'm able to touch that awareness, I am a soul, that's the core. And all the values, all those qualities are within me, the soul. When we're able to stabilize the core of the physical body, it moves in a far more powerful and accurate way. When I'm able to turn on this core of the self, I am a soul, I will move in a far more powerful and accurate way. So this idea of developing the skill to touch the subtle. You see it in physical fitness. And for those who've done it, they might be a little bit ahead of the game because that's the skill that we need to be able to touch what is invisible but very real. I am a soul, not physical, but I exist. You can feel my presence. I'm expressing through the body. I exist. You just can't see me with your physical eyes. When you look, all you see is the body in which I'm sitting. But I am what is animating this body. It's actually a wonder. As I become very quiet, experience who I am eternally, spiritually, I start to activate the core values, this healthy functioning of the self. So our term for core stability is, for the soul, is Om Shanti. That's a sign of core stability. Om Shanti. I am a peaceful being. So I'm going to stop there. I'm looking at the time. I want to see if we can leave time for a little bit of reflection, but is there anything anyone wants to share? Somehow the time flew by. If you want to share anything, you can unmute or type in the chat box.
When you were using the example of the soul who had the hip replacement, and then we noticed that she was moving. I was wondering, and this isn't about that, I was just thinking something deeper, a spiritual level, because you said there was something off in terms of when she was moving. I was wondering if it was sanskars of the soul, that there was a certain, accustomed to moving in a certain way. Because I was thinking about how we could try to change our situations and whatnot, and then there's certain ways in which we move internally in our awareness that that the core of that is really strong.
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is yes. It's always going to come down to what Norvin's calling sanskars, which means these impressions in the soul that we carry from one birth to the other, and loosely translates as personality. But because we might be unaware of most of them, we say subconscious as well. And a very, very gross example of that is I remember in grade 6, everyone grows at that age at different rates. Some have growth spurts, some take a while. And I remember there was one of the students, her name was Tanya, not the Tanya you think, this was a different Tanya, and she had a growth spurt. So we're all still midgets. And I remember her posture was always like this. right? Now, was that a physical thing? It didn't feel like it. It felt like something was going on in the soul, where they were feeling like uncomfortable with standing out, or there was some insecurity issues there that can show up in the carriage of the body and the use. So ultimately, but then when we look at law of karma, there are some mechanical things that can happen through injury and accident, which is sanskars too, because what caused the injury and accident? I mean, if you back up the bus far enough, it's going to get to that. But it could be some injury or whatever the case, or modeling from your parents. Again, that sanskars too. How did I land up with those parents? So, ultimately it's always come down to that answer. But in the short term, it might look like, but yes, you could see that what's going on in the soul through these various storylines will show up in how we express through the body. Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, Leah, we're sending you healing thoughts. I hope that you recover from your injuries. I'll be honest with you, Leah, we all have multiple injuries. Some of them are physical, some of them are mental, some are emotional, and most of them are spiritual. But go ahead and share.
Thank you. Yes. So this past couple of weeks have been pretty rough, like multiple physical injuries coming on together. And here's the odd part. People I know, like multiple people I know, 3 to 4 people who are also getting foot injury, knee injury. I myself have a toe injury right now. So I'm really like, something's going on here, but yeah, injuries week it has been for me and people I know.
Yeah, your sharing is opening up another very beautiful discussion of why certain things happen in the drama individually or collectively. And you're absolutely right. That's also subtle awareness to sort of think, what's going on? What does this all add up to? Maybe it's a little bit more, but than just have an injury. There's always an interesting storyline to what's going on. And we say in spirituality, there's 3 things I want to develop subtle awareness around. And the reason is because they are subtle. So I need to have subtle awareness in order to touch them. The first has been the focus of this session, which is awareness of the self as a spiritual being. That's super helpful when we're going through physical injuries or changes, because now I can kind of have a bit of a buffer. I am not my body. So it gives us a sense of, okay, now I can help the body as it's going through these different things. I, the soul, can remain in a calm state while the body, and that will help the body a lot. I remember once doing an experiment where I think I had a fever or something. So I was lying at home with this fever, and I thought, I'm going to do a little experiment. I, the soul, I'm going to experiment with the state of the body. So first I'm going to start by just thinking, putting myself into a state of stress, which was very easy to do. All I started to think about was, oh my gosh, I'm these days off of work and the work is piling up and I'm getting behind and there's so much I have to do. And, I just sort of went on that train of thinking. It didn't take long. And the fever went up. And then I had, what? Look, you needed a break. This clearly was happening in the drama for a reason. You needed a break. You are far more important than any amount of work, and this kind of train of thought, and reconnecting with myself as a soul, as a peaceful being, which is actually easier to do when the body is unhappy. And suddenly the fever went down. So this relationship, sort of realigning my relationship with the body, puts me in a position where I can help support the body when it's going through a challenge or a difficulty. So that's the first thing we look at in a spiritual practice, is becoming subtle enough to get into that seat, that awareness. I, the soul, I have this deep capacity for peace, and I am the one that is expressing you through the body, using the body. I'm the master of the body. I can help the body. So that's one thing that we look at. The second one is this awareness, as we say, of the Supreme Soul, known as God in the West, all sorts of different names through different cultures and times. But this being whose entire function is dedicated to helping souls heal. So I want to kind of sort that out, and that requires a lot of silence and subtlety. And then the third one is awareness of what's really going on the world stage. It's very easy to get distracted and confused because, again, the rectus abdominis keeps interfering. We just look on the surface. And so we don't get to connect the dots and really see the significance, look underneath. So subtle is such a deep thing for every moment of life. Either I'm on the quantity, on the surface, and getting very affected by that, or I'm operating on this deeper level that can help to stabilize the core, which is very powerful. Stabilize that sense of self and the capacities of the self, and give me an understanding of the core issues going on in the world as well. So it's a huge topic, which we totally have run out of time, but I appreciate what you shared, Leah, because I think it's very relevant for all of us. If it's not physical injuries, it's something else, relationship or financial or something's going in interesting directions. And how can I use that moment for personal growth in a really worthwhile way? Any other? I don't know if we answered your question.
No, I don't know why I was curious about that, but even when you're sharing about on a physical level,
Yeah,
you have to wait till something is really like until there's pain.
yeah,
And someone who has such a significant amount of body awareness to recognize something is often it's not pain that they feel, it's just something is
yeah,
off.
yeah.
On a subtle level, on a spiritual level, you're not waiting for some catastrophe,
No.
but the sensitivity to be able to recognize when something is off and there may not be a logic behind it.
Yeah. So we use the term being able to see a storm from a distance.
Mhm.
And I remember when I was talking to a geophysicist, and he had shared that in Alberta, we're apparently prone to many storms, hailstorms, and we do sometimes get them. But he was sharing Albertans have no idea how many storms we actually are able to ameliorate
Mhm.
through seeding and different. So that means that they are seeing it from a distance and being able to respond ahead of time. And so this subtle awareness depends on being able to see in a different way, see deep, see far. So depth perception, farsightedness, quiet, seeing quietly underneath the surface, not being deceived by quantity or the superficial. It requires, so the term we use is intellect, right? The eye of the soul. And here I mean EYE, that capacity to see. Some use the term insight or wisdom. It's kind of the same function, the intellect. And it's not about, as you say, thinking or being clever. Or, very often, it's like, go here right now. And it's like, why? And you can't logically explain it. But sort of the intellect, this deep, sensitive sensor inside can feel something. And so we want to improve, exercise our capacity to see in this subtle way. Yeah, super important. So we can see things in its early stages and respond ahead of time. And that was the point Leah brought up in the beginning.
Sounds like you need a lot of self-trust.
A lot of self-trust. And I think self-trust, there's two aspects to it. One is the self-trust that kind of has gotten into the hands of arrogance almost, that it turns into self-righteousness. But I love the athletes who have self-trust in the sense that I have faith I can do this, I can develop this. I know I don't have it right now. I know I'm making mistakes right now, but I'm not losing faith. I know I can develop it. That's a very healthy, because that can take direction, that can be coached, but they have faith I can do it. Right. So, I remember once being in a dance class, I've shared this before, and, it was some kind of hip hop crazy thing. And there is a move called a freeze or a stall where you're on one hand and your feet are in the air and you're hanging onto a leg, and it's kind of crazy, right? And he decided to put that in the choreography. I don't know why, because none of us are hip hop dancers, or, we're like these old ladies, we're like, So he's showing us the choreography, and then he breaks down and we're looking, we're going, that's really going to happen? He says, yeah, you may not be able to do it. So it came to the point, and we're totally having severe difficulties, all of us. It was really just fear, right? It's fear. You're going basically into this handstand on one hand, holding it out of complete fear. And then he said the famous words that turned everything around. He said, yeah, sometimes girls can't do this.
You did it on purpose.
I don't know if that's really the accurate way to fire us up, but what it did fire up was feeling, I can do this. I can so do this. And the moment we had that faith, we were all stalling all over the place. It was quite funny. So what happened? What happened from fear to fearless? What happened? That sense of self-trust. Most people, as they age, they lose it. Purity of intention, beautiful. They lose it and they're afraid to do cartwheels and handstands, any inversions. Because I remember once being in a class and they were doing handstands against a wall, very safe. And the room was full and one of me, the ratio wasn't good. It probably wasn't very safe, but I'm trying to sort of do triage and keep an eye on the ones that look absolutely terrified. And they were partnered. They had a spotter. So we always partner them. So I noticed this pair against the wall and I could tell she really had everything she needed to be able to do it. But she kept kicking up and falling down. She's like, I can't do it. She just kept saying that, I can't do it. And I'm like, oh, but you can. You can, you totally can. And just a couple, because when we're afraid, we actually do alignment things. We actually do things that are self-sabotaging. This is big in spirituality. When we don't have self-trust, we self-sabotage, even if the capacity is there. And what I noticed is every time she kicked up, her head was in this really weird alignment that was going to make it very difficult for her to be able to get up there. So I said, you know what? Just look at the opposite wall. Just look over there. Stop looking at the wall behind you. And she looked and she was up. She was up. Now, unfortunately, while I was spending all the time, I turned around and there was absolute havoc in the room and everyone else was walking around on their hands and it was crazy. I was absolutely terrified. But the point was that self-trust. Now, in spirituality, without that self-trust, I won't be able to take direction. So she really had to, in some ways, buy, I can do this. So she could use that direction, line up your, look over here. So her spine would, so we often are getting direction spiritually, but I'm fighting against myself. We call it, trying to drive with the handbrake on. If I have this deep, this is connected to purity, this deep impurity of I can't. Even if you can, you won't. Because what I believe, what I'm holding in my awareness, that attitude is more powerful than the actual fact of the matter. So we really have to have deep trust. I can grow. I can do this. I can. And then I can take the direction. It's not arrogance, because I'm going to have to take correction. I'm going to have to take direction. I'm going to have to take coaching. But now I am moldable, right? I can be worked with. I can work with it. So it's really important. Half the battle is lost exactly when I'm saying I can't. More than half. Almost all the battle is lost if I'm saying I can't. So this is and this is, I know we're over time. This is a beautiful, beautiful part. I think one of the most beautiful parts of saying, because people think, oh, it sounds really fruity and new age and religious. But this is actually the essence of saying, I am a soul, a child of God. If we could get to the significance, like it's a code, that particular awareness is like a code on our intellect or our heart. It will unlock, when I've experienced it, understood it, it will unlock deep faith in the self that can override a mountain of past experiences. But that code has to be unlocked. The heart has to be unlocked. I have to really deeply accept, oh yeah, I am a soul and I do have the same DNA as that beautiful being. So I have the capacity within me. I haven't used it for a long time. It's very rusty. And I've developed a lot of really not very healthy habits, spiritually speaking, but it's still there, right? It's still there. So now we can work with it. But if I don't even believe it's there, it's very difficult. right? So this is why we focus so much, I am a soul, I am a soul, I am a soul. The core, unlock the core. So we are in way over time. I am so sorry. I have no idea what the topic is. Is it foundation next week? Possibly. But the calendar, yeah. Oh, I haven't even put it on the website. I believe the topic next week is foundation. We're already into June. I'm not sure how that happens. So, but if you are able to stick around for 1 more minute, 2 more minutes, we'll just end with a quick reflection. With just one thought, I can turn my vision from looking outwards through the physical eyes to looking or feeling inwards through my subtle eye. The eye that is sensitive to thoughts, feelings, attitudes, memories, impressions, perspectives, perceptions, and the deepest awareness, consciousness, identity. This subtle material, it's all the building blocks for quality of life. It's not the physical stuff. It's not the money in the bank or the car in the garage. It's all of these invisible, subtle aspects that determine quality of life. I want to spend time inside, set up a classroom inside, not to judge or criticize or force or punish, but to understand, learn, grow. Slowly removing the blind spots about myself around these invisible aspects. What are the attitudes that I hold? What is my perception of the world, those around me and myself? What are the memories in my heart beyond this birth? And most important, who am I? Beyond the body, beyond the roles, responsibilities, beyond everything external, who am I? Setting up my classroom inside to study the subtle. Om Shanti. Thank you so much for joining. It was a marathon. Congratulations.